Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Craig Parks. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron. Great to be with you.
Why don't you start us off, just telling me a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I've been working with kids for over 30 years in a lot of different capacities, kids of all ages. I'm also a professional musician, and I'm also a dad of two kids. I've got a 21-year-old son. I don't know how that happened so quickly. And I was like, what? I've got this
Yep.
bearded man now. And I've got a 10-year-old daughter. And so there's 10 and a half years apart. And my son is on the autism spectrum. He actually got diagnosed very, very young as at risk around 16 months. And so by like 17, 18 months, OT and ABA and speech therapy. And so we'd been working with a lot of specialists for a lot of years from a very young age. So it's been quite a journey being, the dad of this amazing young man,
Right.
and also getting a chance to work with a lot of kids with special needs as a camp director as well.
Sure. So before your son was born and diagnosed with autism, I mean, what was your experience growing up with, somebody with a disability or any of that kind of thing?
I think I didn't actually have a whole lot of exposure, honestly.
Yeah.
It was the reality, but I became a very young camp director, and I did have I had some kids on the spectrum, and for me, it was a really great education in one, getting to know these kids, but also really getting to know the parents. That was so much the key in just trying to listen really well.
Right. Yeah, I asked that question because me grew up before my daughter was born. So at 3 months, we found out she was having seizures, epilepsy, cerebral palsy. But looking back, growing up, I don't remember anybody in a wheelchair. I don't remember the word disability being used. I mean, it might have been. I just don't remember any exposure to it. So when she was born, it was all like everything was new to me. I had to learn it all, or figure out ways to find out what's going on. So yeah, it's interesting how some people are way more exposed to it than others, and how that affects people. So
yeah, it was really for me not until my 20s where I started kind of my work life, where I am working with kids and being a song leader, and where I started encountering. There was one young lady who has cerebral palsy, and she loves music, and now she's in her, I think she's in her late 20s, and she'll still come to things of mine, and it's wonderful that connection is still there.
Yeah, for sure. What is your definition of inclusion?
For me, inclusion means that people feel connected. And that can look a lot of different ways, but ultimately it's about connection. I think that when any humans, whether we have special needs, I think we all have special needs, honestly. In fact, I wrote a song called Give and Get, where, the point of it is that, we all have something. So, but to me, inclusion really means that people are feeling connected and not disconnected. And again, that could look a lot of different ways. And I think there's a real kind of partnership that needs to happen to understand, what does that mean for whoever you are in a relationship with? Like, what helps them to feel connected? Because it's not always going to look the same, and that's totally fine. If everybody's in a circle, for somebody that might say, you know what, I feel more connected and more comfortable if I'm just slightly outside of it. And if that's their preference, but they feel connected, great. It's a matter of just really understanding. But for me, it's connection.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, my daughter, a big thing for my daughter, she loves music too, loves going to concerts, loves listening to music. So I like that connection where, it makes a lot of sense. It's one of those places where she just, feels safe, feels, I guess I don't know what she feels like. I haven't asked her, but just at a young age, we'd take her to church and she'd be sitting there like singing the songs, just belting them out, not caring like what people think of how she sounds. And I'm like, I can't sing like that because I'm older and I'm worried about what people think of me. So I remember looking at her and just in in awe of the pureness of her worshiping and singing. So music's been a pretty
Yeah,
big part of her life too.
it's amazing that what we like, what we can learn from our kids, like that
Yes.
that level of freedom is,
Yes.
I think, is really quite beautiful. And would anybody in the church get upset that she was singing so loud, or did they
No.
appreciate
No.
her level of freedom?
No, then I never had anybody say anything to me. So I mean, I think they must have appreciated her. Yeah. But as a
Yeah.
parent, you're sitting there and it's like you're still like, oh, that's really loud. I hope it doesn't bother somebody. But then you like look at her and she's just so happy, and it's like that's fine if they don't like it. That's on
Yeah.
them.
Well, I think Aaron, you really, like, you point to something I think a lot of us parents of kids with special needs deal with. There's this tension of like, is my kid who's behaving differently than maybe typical kids
Right.
bothering somebody? And it's like, part of me is like, I don't care if my kid is doing
Right.
okay. It's like there's so much tension in that, and
Yep.
it's real, because we want our kids to be included, and we also don't want others' experiences to be eroded from it either. And so, and it's
Right.
inclusion's a nice word, and everybody be like, well, great, let's just have inclusion. But there really is very real tension in that too.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times education can be a help in that. There was a time where I was doing a song session with a bunch of kids, and there were some teachers. There was a girl who's on the spectrum, nonverbal, didn't have words, but she would make a lot of noises. And there were teachers who ended up kicking her out. And the parent, when the parent found out, she was so upset. She was ready to like pull her kid from this organization. Right. And we ended up having a long talk about it. I was like, hey, you know what? This is maybe an opportunity to, one, educate the teachers, but educate the entire school. Right. And so we had an assembly, and this parent came in, and I also talked too, from my own experiences, and we educated the parents, the students, and the teachers. And we said, she's making these noises, this is what's going on. So now you know what's happening, but you don't have to be afraid of her. In fact, she would love you. Just came up and said hi. And then after that, kids felt so much more connected to this girl, and she was able to be in that space. And when she made noises, it wasn't distracting because people kind of just knew what the situation was. So I think a lot of times, like what you're doing with your podcast is important because it's a process of education, and people need to just understand like what's going on and to build their own compassion muscle.
Yeah, for sure. I understand you got a very valuable piece of parenting advice from a stranger before the birth of your child that made a huge impact on you during his birth. What was that advice that you learned?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was playing a lot of racquetball back in the day, and there was like these round robin tournaments. So you just meet up with whoever, okay. and so there was a guy I was like waiting for the next game, and we were just in the lobby. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a dad pretty soon. And he says to me, hey, listen, I want to tell you something that nobody told me, and I really wish they had told me before my kid was born. I'm like, yeah, what is it? And he said, okay, when my kid was born, my kid came out and was purple. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. But then when he started crying, his whole skin turned, and it was like he was fine. He's like, but nobody told me that. And so if that happens in your situation, I just want you to know so you don't have to freak out. And so it was, I thanked him, and nobody had ever told me that. And so when my son was born, he actually was purple, and I didn't freak out. And then when he started crying, I saw his skin color change. It was like incredible. But that's what that really story made me think about was like what I've been working with kids for over 30 years, right? And I'm a dad to 2 now of my own, and I thought I was so grateful for that information that I now put together my own course of information for parents of young kids called Parenting A to E, because I want parents to have this information so that their parenting journey can be filled with greater connection, greater joy, and for them to learn how to make the everyday parts of life memorable and joyful. And so I put together this course that is going to be available probably in about a week or so.
Awesome. Yeah, it is interesting. Like you share that piece of information. The thing that popped into my head is my daughter. She had an IEP all through her schooling, and I remember like we went to my son's back to school. I think it was kindergarten, and it's the me and his mom, him, teacher, 5 minutes, drop off stuff, you leave. Then my daughter's was after that because they're 15 months apart, so it was like preschool probably. I just remember going into that and expecting the same thing because that's what just happened, and no, it was like an actual like IEP meeting. There's like 10 people across the table, and I was like, nobody told me this. So like, you were saying that had been like that situation for me. It would have been nice if somebody would have said, hey, there's going to be 10 people there. It's not going to look anything like your son's meeting. Because I get there and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I can't process. I can't contribute because I don't know what's going on. So just that kind of triggered that memory for me. Just, yeah, those seems kind of weird, the sharing of it, but it does make a big difference for sure.
Yeah, I think, we are resources for each other. And I think that's, what your podcast is all about, which is a really, really beautiful thing. I'm sure you're making a difference for a lot of parents.
Yeah, thank you. Can you give an example of how you turned a stressful and divisive parenting situation into a fun and connecting one?
Yeah. So as a professional musician and a songwriter, I've written, kids songs as well.
Yep.
This is so when my daughter learned the word no when she was around 2 or so, that could be a really stressful situation when kids are just always like, no, that you want them to do certain things like no. I was getting pretty stressed about it, and I ended up writing a song called "My Favorite Word Is No," and and what was great about it was that it turned into this total funny, humorous thing. So I started singing it with my daughter, and we would both just kind of start laughing, and it would just kind of diffuse the tension. Right. But I'm a really big believer in the power of music and the ability of music to shift kind of how we are. Like if we're in a state of stress, music's a really, really great way to kind of shift us into a more calm way of being. Or if we're really mellow and we want to feel hyped or pumped, we can put on certain music, right? So music's a really powerful tool.
Right. So where did your love of music start?
Well, here we are, parents, right? And it started in the home. Like my dad especially played a lot of music in the home. Like when I was growing up, a lot of Beatles and Stevie Wonder and Billy Joel and Elton John and The Who. And, and then I had 2 older brothers who, my oldest brother was really into Grateful Dead and my other brother was really into Bruce Springsteen. And, and so I just heard a lot of music. And then, I got piano lessons. That was my first instrument when I was around 10 years old. And then I started playing guitar as a teenager and just fell totally in love with playing music as well. And so much of my life revolves around music. And ironically, for my son, he didn't talk till well past the age of 2. And but he sang a melody. The first time I heard anything that was something I recognized out of his mouth was not words. It was actually a melody. I remember walking away from his crib and hearing, I'm like, oh, that's the ABC. And from, even in utero, I was playing a lot of music for my son and for both my kids. And so it's just something I've always been doing. And with my son, Jonah, music has been really, really key in our bond and our connection. He got his first drum set when he was 3 years old, and he sits down at this drum set and he's like, doo, bop, doo, doo. I'm like, oh my God, he's playing a beat. I mean, the music is in him. Turns out he's a really incredible drummer. And he also DJs now. And then when he was 5, I discovered that he has perfect pitch. So his passion for music, and I created a youth band for him. And now I actually run an adult. I've got my own rock band. Then I'm also got an adult band in the synagogue that I work at, and he's the drummer in that. And he'll come and sit in with my rock band, playing like Motown and Aretha Franklin and rock and Beatles and all sorts of stuff. But so music for us is such a deep connector. And oftentimes my son has had and still does. He struggles with emotional regulation, and But like I was talking about earlier, music is that thing that can help get him through really, really hard, frustrating times for him.
Mm-hmm. That's great. This might be a hard question, but who's like your favorite musician or band?
So currently the band Fish is probably my favorite band. You know, I mean, it'd be easy for me to choose the Beatles just because they were just so seminal in
Yeah.
everything. But Fish, they've been together for over 40 years, the same four people, and their ability to improvise, their ability to not have boundaries or feel like stuck that they have to have a certain genre. So they'll play bluegrass, rock, funk, soul, um, jazz. Like they go all over the place, but they're always listening to each other, and they're also, in terms of their live performances, which is kind of what they're known for, it's a deep relationship with their audience. It's really a very communal kind of event. Certain parts of certain songs, like the audience has roles in the songs and like things of that nature. And so I just love them because they're fun and they're just phenomenal musicians.
Yeah. I actually have never. I don't know if I've ever heard a Fish song though. Somebody else mentioned them recently, so I should probably listen to some of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, they cover a lot of genres. So if you hear one Fish song, it's gonna be hard to be like, well, I like them or don't like them, Okay.
So,
yeah.
I'll just have Alexa play me like a bunch of them or something.
There you go. And I'm sure they come to Minnesota, or I know Fish comes to the Midwest. So if you get a chance to go to one of their shows, that's
go to that one.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we go to a lot of concerts too. So I've seen Elton John 4 times, I think. The Eagles I've seen 4 or 5 times. So we've seen Garth Brooks. We saw Billy Joel at the U.S. Bank Stadium. So we've seen some stuff. But yeah, we like music too. But yeah, we're going to. My daughter likes Jelly Roll and Post Malone, so they're going on tour. So we're going to go see them in May. Bring her with us. So we'll see if she can not scream the whole time, but it'll be fun just bringing her there and let her enjoy it and have fun. So.
Oh, that's so awesome! I hope she has a blast. I'm taking my daughter to her first big rock concert. Actually, I'm taking her to see Fish at the Hollywood Bowl in April.
Oh, that would be fun, yeah.
Yeah, and actually tonight I'm taking her to this little show. Keyboardist from Earth, Wind and Fire, and a couple of amazing vocalists, great musicians. They're going to be reimagining the Beatles music in like a soul and funk way. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, there's a couple local musicians around here too that she loves too. So if they're out playing somewhere, we'll have them go see them because she loves them and they know her, so they'll come and talk to her, and she thinks that's the greatest thing to have the person up on stage say her name and point her out and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Oh, it's so awesome, Aaron. Like
that's fun.
Again, like music is such a gift. That's why in my parenting A to E, like I've got 14 songs, original songs that are like for the everyday, for bath time, for waking up, for bedtime, for washing hands. Because I'm a firm believer that for parents, like, look, you could take your kid to Disneyland or to a concert, but most of parenting is the everyday stuff. And my whole thing is, how do we make that really joyful?
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I don't have the musical ability you have, but like when she was younger, I made up a song that I would sing to her, putting her to sleep, and I still sing it to her. She still likes me singing it to her. So yeah, it's interesting how I made up a song and I'm not very musical. So
and thanks for saying that, because that's the point. I don't want people going, well, Craig, you're a professional musician, so of course you can do it. Like these songs I wrote are like really, really easy melodies, and they were written like when I was just giving my kid a bath. It just came out. So like you don't have what a great example. Like you don't have to have a lot of musical ability. Like the fact that you created a song for your daughter that she still loves, is proof that anybody can do it. You don't need to have a great voice, because for kids, the voice of their parents is the voice of love. So hearing it is comforting. They're not sitting there going like, "Ooh, Dad, you were a little bit pitchy right there."
That's a good point. Yeah. How do you see music making an impact on families? You might have talked about that a little bit, but how do you see music helping families?
Yeah, well, for me, it's about, if you're a parent, like my dad is amazing. He was such a hard worker. I didn't see him much because he was often working 7 days a week, trying to, support the family. But my strongest memories of when we did have time together were around music. He'd pop on music. He'd put me up on his shoulders, start dancing around the house. And, so for me, I gave that a lot of thought. I'm like, well, when my kids are older, they're in their 20s or 30s, how do I want them to look back on their childhood? I'm like,
Right.
I want them to have a lot of great memories with me. And I realized that, oh my God, music is a key force in that. So, but also rituals, right? So every time I gave my daughter a bath, it would be scrub, scrub, scrub in the tub. Right? I had this whole song, right? Every time they go to wash their hands, it'd be like, rub, 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 rub the front, and so I just, and likewise, I wrote a lullaby for my son that every night at bedtime, I would sing this sweet song. And, I just know that there's so many of these memories that my kids are going to have associated with music, because music like lodges in there in a way that nothing else does. I'll do music for senior citizens and Alzheimer's places. Mm-hmm. And these are people who can't remember their own kids' names anymore, right? But I'll start singing, "This land is your land," and they'll start singing with me because I think just the music is there. So it's a really powerful tool. I really strongly recommend that every parent use music in that way.
Yeah. So I grew up Baptist, so we were at church every time the doors were open. So I mean, even though I haven't sang those like hymns for probably 20 years, if I go to a church where they're like singing those hymns, like I don't even have to look at the book. Still, it's like that. I mean, that was 20 years ago, and I can still like sing the songs without even having to look at a book. So it is interesting how like that music kind of lodges itself somewhere in there, and it's still there after all those years. So yeah. It also does bring back the memories attached to it, like you're saying, because my dad went to all but one of the Eagles concerts with my dad because he likes the Eagles, and we went every time they were close by. So that is a memory I have with him too. Like you said, that he worked a lot, so I either was working with him out at the family business, or the other memories are going to like concerts with him. So it's kind of have the same thing. So
yeah, it's so sweet. I think it's really underutilized for parents too. I mean, if we understand how powerful it is as a memory making device and as a device for real connection and joy, I think more parents would do it. And that's why I created this course. I'm like, man, I want it's like that guy in the racquetball court saying, hey, I'm like, oh my God, here's 14 songs that you can just use with your little ones that are going to create amazing memories and incredible connection and joy.
Yeah. How has it been for you, like as a dad of a child with autism or as disability? Like, how was that for you as far as like relating to finding other dads, or how did you kind of get through that part?
Well, it was hard. Like it was really, really hard, especially, like I told you, we got the diagnosis really, really early. And, and Jonah, he's verbal now, but at that point, I didn't know if I would ever hear my son say daddy or I love you, or the things that we kind of dream about, as parents. And, and I know a lot of parents with kids with special needs have kids that are nonverbal, but the one thing that I learned was, because we worked with a lot of specialists, so my parenting A to E. So A stands for affect and E stands for effect. Like if you want an effective relationship and connection with your kid, we have to master our affect. And what affect is the emotions manifested in our body and our voice. So knowing how to use our body and our voice, and so many of the specialists would teach me, like with your son, Jonah, they'd be like, you need to have big affect in your face, So if there's no verbal communication, let's say he's playing with a toy, if you go up next to him and you're like, oh, and then he'll look and he'll see your facial expressions and you guys will be connected. And so, like the course I put together, like teaches fully how to use your body and your voice to maximize connection. And so that made it easier. But it was hard. And, again, my son, his struggles are really around frustration tolerance, and his emotional regulation can break down. And especially, in social situations, that can be tough. And what I've found is that a lot of parents who have kids with special needs feel and are very isolated. Right. And that makes it a lot harder. You asked me, like, how'd you get through it? We did isolate, my wife and I, because we try to be in play groups and all the kids are playing and all the parents are talking with each other. But we had to look after Jonah to make sure that he wasn't hurting himself or somebody else. And we couldn't just be at ease. And so we just got out of all our play groups and we're just in all of our therapies and just trying to help our kid as best we could. But in that process, we weren't taking care of our own well-being. Like, we weren't really connecting with other parents. And, for any parents that are listening to this podcast, one piece of advice I would say is, please go find a support group, find others who can say, oh, I've been there, or at least I understand that. I totally get that. Right. When you're talking about your daughter making noise, like, we can all be like, oh yeah, we've all been in public places where our kids did things that were not typical. And, we're tripping out in our own minds. Like, is this okay? Are people judging us? Right. And to normalize those experiences and to know that we're not alone is important. I actually put together some, support groups for parents with special needs. And it was amazing, the stories that parents would share. And they would say, this is the only place where I've talked about this, and how good it feels for them to feel seen and understood.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When my daughter was younger, we did a lot of stuff with the Minnesota Epilepsy Foundation, or Epilepsy Foundation of Minnesota, where, like you're saying, it was just other families who had a child with epilepsy, and we'd go to a pumpkin patch, and it was nice just to go there, not have to explain the whole story, just be a family, just do something together. Everybody kind of knows that other people are going through similar stuff, and not having to, like, explain again, or like, this is what we're happening. Like, every time you go someplace, yeah, she has seizures, and explaining the whole story and reliving it. So yeah, it's definitely need to find your community or group that you can hang out with, for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then, the other thing is, besides being a parent, I was a camp director for 27 years. Yep. And, I just really want to say this, if you've got any parents listening to this, if you have a kid with special needs and you want them to be included, please talk to the director of a camp, and ask them, what's your camp's philosophy? How do you deal with kids with special needs? Because there will be some people who will be fully supportive, and there'll be some people who won't. And trying to get your kid in a place where the director, the one who sets the tone of the whole place, doesn't want to be inclusive or is not really into it, it's going to be harder. So, but I know for me, even before I had my own kids, when I was a camp director, I just always wanted to listen and pay attention and know, what are the things that can help your kid be successful here? And if we can do it, we will. Do you need visual schedules? Do you need, and then there's certain things we do for all of our campers, transitional warnings. Are there sensory things that your kid needs, that, they need a fidget, whatever it might be that we could do to have their kid be successful, we would do it.
Yeah, I love that. What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something everybody can do to start being more inclusive today.
I think asking questions, in a non-judgmental, but in a real, curious and compassionate way is, right. If you see somebody struggling, even to say, hey, can I be of any help? For us to reach out to one another as human beings and to show that we actually care, instead of judging, instead of making assumptions, just get curious, I think is the main thing.
Yeah, I love that. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your parenting A to E and where everybody can find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's really designed for parents of younger kids, of kind of 0 to 5 or 6 year olds. And the first module of the course is just a series of lessons they're real short videos too, because I know parents are overwhelmed. So it's each video is anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes maximum. And the first module is teaching you how to completely use your body, your facial expressions, your voice, your arms, your hands, your shoulders, and how to be silly and playful using your body. And then the second part of the course is these 14 songs that, when you do them ritualistically, will build those joyful and turn everyday moments like washing hands or mealtime or playtime or bedtime or bath time into deep, beautiful, joyful memory that will be memories. And then the third one is activities that parents can do. There's 10 activities that are screen-free that are really bonding and just a ton of fun to do. And then I've got some bonus material like bedtime rituals, bath time rituals, how to get your kids to clean up their clothes off the floor without nagging them. And then I got a piece of prose called The Glider that I wrote for, when I had to get rid of the glider that I, rocked both my kids on after, 15 years of having this glider. It was kind of an emotional thing for me. And so I ended up writing this piece of prose from the perspective of the glider. And I put it on social media, years ago, and people were really, really deeply moved by it. And the point of it is, it gets you really present to the fact that time is moving along. And so your kids are going to grow up, and before you know it, they're going to be out of the house. Right. So soak in the moments and be present to your life and be present to the blessing and joy of getting to be parents to our children.
Yeah.
And people can find me at, they can write to me at Craig Parks at parentingharmony.com. They can go to parentingharmony.com as well. They can find me on TikTok at Parenting Harmony and the number 1, Instagram, Parenting Harmony, at Parenting Harmony. And I really encourage people to get in touch and to utilize these tools. I also have an ebook called How to Stress Less and Have More Fun with Your Kids. So different tools that will help parents.
Yeah, I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes. You ready for the last question?
Let's do it.
Do you like Spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
I'm a pescatarian, so that would not fit for me.
No. I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum is located. So if you ever want to visit the Spam Museum, you got to come here. So I've been asking all my guests that just to see what the answers are. So it's been kind of interesting.
I'm really curious. I'm really curious, Aaron. So what's the percentage of people who like Spam or don't?
It kind of depends on the people I have. Well, obviously it depends on who I'm interviewing in the order, but it's almost 50-50, probably a little actually probably a little higher now no's than yeses, but it's pretty close to 50-50. Yeah.
What exactly is Spam? What kind of meat is it? Is it like a combination of different meats?
Let me see. So you can say, where's the direction?
You're gonna have to get to that museum, Aaron, if you don't know this.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's okay. There's not much. Pork with ham, salt, water, modified potato starch, sugar, sodium nitrate is what it says in the can. But I knew it was mostly pork because Hormel, they have pork, so it was kind of something they came up with during one of the world wars to use some of this product they weren't using and came up with a new product that it has a long shelf life, so they shipped it a lot during the wars, and it's one of the reasons why Hawaii apparently loves Spam is during the war they ate a lot of it, and now there's tons of Spam in Hawaii, and it's interesting.
If I were to go to the Spam Museum, I would have one question for them, and that is, how do they feel about the fact that their product eventually became known as a word for email that nobody knows?
That's a great question, and I don't think I've ever heard the answer, actually. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
They can't be happy about that. I remember growing up in the 80s, there was a dietary product, like these little chocolates to help suppress hunger, and it was called AIDS. And that was the name of the product. And then when the disease AIDS became a thing, I was like, well, that's the end of that product.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of funny because there was one time I had a Spam shirt on with that logo, and somebody's like, hey, is that Spam the lunch meat or Spam the email? And I was like, that's an odd question, but apparently I'm like, this is the lunch meat one. Why would I have an Spam email shirt on? That makes no sense.
That's funny.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's been a real pleasure, Aaron. It's great,
Yeah.
great being on with you. And thanks for all that you're doing to promote inclusion so that every human being can feel valued.
Thank you. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.